Tu atua mai, tātou ia, tātou katoa. Hui e, taiki.
Thanks. Thank you. Apologies, I have one for Councillor Herb Schuller. I understood he was trying to Zoom in live, sorting that out at this very moment. So
I'll move.
I have a seconder. Deputy Mayor Schuller, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. He may arrive and drop in and out throughout this meeting. Carried. Public forum. There is no public forum this morning, Christine. No one. Acceptance of late items. There are no late items. Confidential business to be transferred into the open. No confidential business to be transferred into the open. Change in order of business. In change. There is no change to the order of business. Confirmation of the minutes. Item 7.1. Minutes of the City Future Committee held on the 31st of March 2025. Are there any corrections? Is everyone happy with the minutes as they are written? I'm happy to move that they are true and correct. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baker has seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Declaration of conflicts of interest. Does anyone? No. If something does arise, please inform me. Item 8. Numbers seem to be a bit off here. General business. Item 9.1. Quarterly update. Growth, land use, planning and transport strategy projects to May 2025. Christine and Andy. Christine. And while waiting for Andy, this is on page 24 of the agenda.
Morning, committee members. This is our regular 3-month monitoring report around growth and land use projects. I'll just do what I normally do, excuse me, and just quickly run through some of the highlights, and then we can focus on your questions. So just starting with the Western Corridor, and while this is an NZTA project, it is a significant milestone that they've announced that they're moving forward with the State Highway 29 investment and allocating roughly $100 million to the first phase of that through further design and designation work and land acquisition. That project's very important in terms of supporting existing and future growth in that area, and that's one of the key smart growth corridors being the Western Corridor. We're just working through obtaining a little bit more detailed information on their latest plans and designs, and we will sort of assess that at a staff level and do some further reporting back at the appropriate time to council. Related to that, in terms of greenfield projects, over the last quarter, as you're well aware, the Tauriko West plan change has now become fully operative. So that again is a major step forward. And probably the key thing happening in Tauriko West at the moment is Kāinga Ora and the government's review of their Ferncliff Farms landholding, which is ongoing, but has some impacts back to council. So we continue to remain as connected to that as we can. On other greenfield projects, we've had the Ohauiri, Upper Ohauiri urban growth area become fully operative as well this quarter, which was a private plan change. And we'll speak to some related matters about that in terms of transport later in this item. In terms of our other key urban growth area that we're progressing at the moment being Te Tumu, that's where negotiations continue with the TK14 Maori Land Trust. Those are a little slower than anticipated, so we thought we'd be reporting back to the committee through May or June for decisions. It will most likely be, a month or two later than that. I think the key thing with projects like Te Tumu is that they are potentially impacted by the resource management reforms. Again, we'll speak separately about the reforms in terms of a couple of different items on the agenda today, but we're at the very early stages of considering how some of our existing planning projects like Te Tumu or our review of our industrial and commercial zones are impacted by the reforms in terms of how they progress and on what sort of timeframe they progress. Just moving forward from there onto Plan Change 27, which is to do with flooding for intense rainfall, ensuring those issues which are experienced in the city are well managed, and that as development occurs, those issues don't get worse as more development occurs, more hard surfaces are built with more stormwater runoff. So that plan change, again, has become fully operative in the last quarter, only very recently, through the resolution of appeals through the Environment Court. The next item there, I won't go through in any detail, which is around the various government reforms, around resource management, around funding, financing, and more broadly than that, there is a paper, the next item on the agenda, which Christine will speak to, and then there is a workshop session at the end of the committee meeting focused on the resource management aspects. Over the last few months, we have been progressing some applications to the New Zealand Infrastructure Commission Infrastructure Planning Priorities Program, which is basically establishing the pipeline of infrastructure projects across New Zealand, and particularly the key projects which the government agree need to proceed forward. It's an important work stream, as having our projects listed through there will be essential when it comes to negotiating things like a city deal or other funding opportunities. So we're focusing on a range of key transport projects such as 15th Ave, Turret Road, and Cameron Road Stage 2, as well as key infrastructure required for future greenfield areas like Te Tumu. Just moving quickly to the outstanding actions section. So there's a few outstanding actions we have there. The first one is around the paper around Mount North intensification. Again, the update's similar to last time in that we're still waiting for the government to release its guidance or propose changes around the National Policy Statement for Urban Development, which is going to have some amendments around intensification requirements, around development capacity requirements. We are anticipating those to be released this month or perhaps early into June. But there is some uncertainty around whether they will be finalised now or through the future resource management reform. Certainly, the government has indicated that implementation will be through the future reform of the RMA, so not for a few years' time. So hopefully we're not too far away from being able to report back on that matter. We also have the outstanding action around citywide development contributions and the timing of requiring that payment. Again, that's tied up with two reforms underway at the moment, both the waters reform and the review of the development contributions and proposed replacement with a development levy system. So we continue to await a little bit further information on both of those, as well as decision making from yourselves around the waters reform through the annual plan process. So probably a couple of months away from reporting back around that particular action. The third action there is around interim servicing and a memo that was requested to elected members around options, basically to be able to move growth forward at a faster pace through more temporary infrastructure servicing options before the final investment was made. This action was handed over to the infrastructure group, and I understand that the memo has been completed and circulated to yourselves, but Nick may have a further update. That's correct. And the last action we have there is around the Welcome Bay and Ohauiri transport connections, tied up with the recent progress around both the private plan change for Upper Ohauiri and the release of the land at the end of Rosedale Drive for urban development and the transport issues that are experienced in that community. So we had prepared that memo and circulated to yourselves, and at your request we've turned that into an attachment which is now been included in this agenda but separate to the agenda. So it's for those in the community that are interested, it is available on our website under this particular meeting. So I think we can work our way through that, but perhaps now is a good time just to stop for questions on the rest of the report, and then we can work through that separately, if that works.
Thank you very much, Andy. Welcome, Councillor Schuler. Good to see you. Can you hear us? Can you hear me, Councillor?
Yeah, I can. Thank you.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Right. Questions for, yes, we can hear you. Questions for Andy? Councillor Kudak.
Thanks, Andy.
No, you
In
turned it off.
relation to, it was on. It's live all the time. Andy, in reference to development contributions, so are you fairly sure that the new provisions around development levies is going to supersede the development contribution? Why I asked is potentially could it provide additional or optional approaches to collecting development contributions? I'm thinking previously we had the financial contribution regime, and that's still, as I understand it, an option, and then development contributions came along. So potentially could we see a third optional rather than substitute or replacement of the current provisions?
So the government and their, I guess, communication around these reforms is that the development levy system will replace development contributions, and they'll introduce legislation, I guess, to repeal the development contribution provisions from the Local Government Act and replace them with new provisions around development levies, so it won't be an optional.
Further to that, so is that something that you guys have discussed in terms of, promoting perhaps to leave some of those opportunities in, given the maturity of the current TCC policies around developed contributions? Happy that it all goes.
Yeah, certainly we're engaging with officials around their reforms. I guess the way, while they're talking about, I guess it being a whole new replacement system, the reality is it's actually not dissimilar to development contributions, and it's really, I guess, an amendment to the development contribution system. So it will be quite similar, and probably many of the existing provisions from the existing, I guess, regime will transfer into the new system.
Deputy Mayor Schuler.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on, first question on Mount North. The report you've said is coming, and you've listed it as an outstanding item. In terms of the outputs of that report, are there a number of questions that the report is going to answer? Are the questions already determined in terms of what the likely outputs from the report on Mount North are?
I guess what we'll be reporting back is what are the proposed government reforms? What do they mean for, I guess, more broadly, our requirements around providing for intensification and delivering a certain amount of development capacity in the system? And therefore, what options does that give us in terms of in particular around that Mount North area? Does it give us the option of reconsidering what we've done? What the previous council, decisions were, or not? And if there are options, what are those options, and what sort of time frame might we be able to consider those in? So we haven't scoped the report up in any detail at this stage, but that's, I think, what we're looking to cover. But if there are other particular matters you would like us to cover, we'd be happy to take that feedback on board to make sure that we're delivering something that meets your expectations.
Would you like a supplementary?
No, it's a different question, if I may. So just in terms of Keenan Road, you talk about coming back to elected members on completion of the technical report, that'll come back to elected members, and then will be community consultation. Can we please have your structure of how you're intending to do the community consultation within that report when you come back to us, so that because I think we are aware that I think we're getting better at consultation, but it would be good to actually be able to discuss how you're intending to do that consultation as well, please.
Yes, we certainly can.
A supplementary.
Deputy Mayor.
So just there's a number of other little admin comments I've got about the report in general. I wonder if I could just come back to you both with those by email. Would probably be simpler, if that's all right.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While government was vacillating on State Highway 29, how much did ratepayers invest in the planning of that corridor? And given government has recently said that we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem, has government reimbursed council for the planning on State Highway 29, which is a core function of central government?
So I don't have the exact numbers, but I can speak, I guess, to the question. We can come back with some more information if we need to. So effectively what happened in a nutshell is that when we began the planning for Tauriko West, the government at that time was very on board. They had letters of support that they'd written through Smart Growth to say at the same time we will plan and then invest in State Highway 29. And then as things played out and elections happened, governments changed, transport priorities changed. The government entirely put their State Highway 29 project under review and then on hold, as it didn't line up with their transport priorities. And so we brought that matter back to the council of the day and said, what do you want to do? We've got a problem. Either we can't progress with Tauriko West, or we may have to look at finding a way that we can deliver some interim transport improvements on the state highway network to get things happening, because we had, I guess, that imperative to release more housing. The council decided that it wanted to have a crack at that, so it invested in the Enabling Works business case. I can't remember off the top of my head, probably at least $1 million in that, but we'd have to come back to you on that. And then because that was focused on releasing housing, not necessarily resolving the state highway issues, the government did not fully fund the construction of that, as you know, and we received a NZTA subsidy for 51% of most of that investment, but not 51% of all of it. So we've come up with a funding stack to meet the rest of that cost. None of that is actually ratepayer funded. It's all funded through other sources, development contributions, direct developer funding, IAF, the IFF levy, which I guess is a broader ratepayer contribution. And so, yeah, there's a significant IFF contribution, which you could deem to be a ratepayer contribution. So we can come back with the detail there, but I suffice to say that the council and its community has invested significantly in the state highway.
Yeah, just one for me on Plan Change 38, the business land framework. I've been getting lots of feedback from the commercial industrial community around when you do this review and the plan and the city plan, are there plans to allow commercial businesses to move into industrial and industrial consents to move into commercial based on business growth, business need, market pressure? Because at the moment we've got people in the wrong place trying to do the wrong business and they can't switch.
Yeah, that's, I guess, one of the key issues about what activities should be required in which zones. It's a key part of the review. We can speak to you about that some more in due course, but I guess there'll be different viewpoints on that from different parts of the business sector. Some will want to be able to establish anywhere, while I guess in some senses some businesses don't go well together, or we also need to consider I guess the limited supply of some types of land, particularly industrial land, and whether competition from other sort of business needs is the right thing there, given that it's difficult to supply enough industrial land for the city. So those things will all be part of the project, and we'll certainly be engaging with you early in that project to make sure we're picking up the things that you guys are hearing and that you want us to do through that work.
Thank you very much, Andy. Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Andy, can you clarify on page 35, where it talks about the submissions to the Infrastructure Priorities Program? Like, what is the submission that council are doing for variable road pricing in that context?
Yeah, so that's just identifying that it could be, I guess, an option around being implemented to help, I guess, manage our transport challenges moving forward. It's not committing and suggesting that council would be doing something like that, but it does line up with, as I understand, the City Deals submission that we've made to suggest that that's one of the things that would be considered moving forward. Obviously, there's various different views amongst whether we would do that and the pros and cons of that. It's not suggesting that we would be doing anything, but it's just to make sure that's on the table.
Through the Chair, do those submissions come back to us before they go, or are they being sent by staff?
They've been sent by staff, and they're consistent with, they really just document decisions or direction that's already been made and factual information about projects. It's to get them into the program. So then subsequently, if you do wish to pursue those, then one of the criteria the government will likely look at, if it's looking to support either in funding or in some other way, is it in the IPP program or not? And if it's not, then it's going to get a lower weighting than if it is. So it's just creating a pathway so that if things proceed at a later point, it's already sitting in there.
Can you briefly outline what the submission said, and are we able to get copies of those?
It's just best to send copies of it. Sarah is here and she was the author of most of it, if you'd like her to speak to it, or if you just want us to circulate it, and then you can.
I guess I'd just like a very, very brief, high level, I guess I don't understand in the context of the IPP what it would say that would be different to our other submission, and yeah, just basically what could be fast tracked with this.
So I think your question is specifically on the VRP IPP application. Okay, so as Christine mentioned, the IPP applications are applications to get projects or programs into the Infrastructure Priorities Program. And so we aligned the applications that we submitted with those in the intent of the city and regional deals to ensure that we're not going to be missing out if something is picked up and there is a requirement that it already sits under the National Infrastructure Program to be funded. So we've put in one for variable road pricing at a very high level. The application just talks to similar to in terms of the content of that, it talks to the potential for variable road pricing and a scheme being developed that could have certain benefits. It's only stage one. So through the IPP process, you could put an application in at stage 1, 2, or 3. Stage 1 is very, very high level, very initial concept, and no real detail has been undertaken. But the government are really interested in, or the National Infrastructure Body are really interested in understanding where opportunities might sit. So stage 1 is very much just an opportunity application, and that's where the VRP application sits. Stage 2 is when some business case work has already been done, so roughly around that indicative business case mark. And then stage 3 is when you've actually done a lot more detail, and that would be your detailed business case. So some of those other programs, such as 15th Welcome Bay, sat in a stage 3 remit, whereas VRP sits at stage 1. Does that help? Is that enough context?
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Sculler.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just in terms of on page 37 on development agreements, talks about TCC negotiating agreements with a number of developers, and on the actions it talks about negotiations being underway. Are any of those outside delegation of staff? Do elected members get involved in any of those development agreements and the negotiations, please?
No, so they're all within delegation to staff. Normally would bring a report to council to get that delegation. And that's, for example, the case with Terraco West, where we're working within that delegation. Where things go beyond delegation, or where we're having early discussions with developers and we just need to get a bit more detail before we bring it to you, then we'd bring a separate report up for decision making from yourselves.
So is there a list of the current delegations that are being used for the different development agreements that are happening? I just don't have a feel for
we can put a little
approvals.
table together. Some of them have specific delegations, others will need further reporting at an earlier stage, but yes, we'll put that together.
Thank you.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, just a quick question. The comment on page 39, NZTA's tolling team will present to TCC. Is that to staff or elected members?
We have a session with their team this week, actually. It hasn't happened yet. It's to staff.
Get an update on where that's going as soon as we can. Thank you.
Any more questions for staff? This is in relation to this current report. We'll get to the attachment second. This is just on relation to the transfer update. Okay, there's no more in relation to this. Now, questions relating to attachment 1.
Would you like me to just briefly speak to it?
Just briefly speak to it, please, Andy.
Yeah, sure. So you can join if you like, Sarah. So this attachment sort of covers off the more recent investigations we've done around transport connectivity between the city and the suburbs of Ohauiti and Welcome Bay. I guess we recognise that those areas are not particularly well connected and that there is significant existing congestion in those areas, particularly at peak times. Often the network works pretty well outside of those peak times. A lot of the work stems from the Welcome Bay and Ohauiti planning study that we did back in, I think it was around 2020. That was looking at that stage around further development opportunities in that area. And there was quite a push from their other smart growth partners that TCC should look within its own area before thinking about expanding beyond its current boundaries. So we undertook two planning studies. One was that Ohauiti Welcome Bay study. And then there was another study called the Rural Land Study, which looked at all the other remaining rural land in our city and its urban development potential. So the Welcome Bay and Ohawiri planning study was actually focused largely on future growth in that area that we could open up. We identified that there was substantial areas that could be opened up for development, but it would need significant infrastructure investment, particularly transport investment. So a key part of that study was looking at the various options, road alignment options for at least a second way in and out of Welcome Bay and Ohawiri. As set out in that attachment, there were 3 options that were identified, and then the preferred option, which is shown on page 5, which is page 5. There's 2 numberings, but I'm using the one right at the bottom of the page, which was the yellow option in the middle. That was looked at in some more detail. And one of the issues, I guess the key issue that you've got with any transport investment in that area is the constraints that you're working with. The topography is very difficult. Gullies, streams, escarpments, existing urban development, corridors that have a limited width. You've got the harbour involved. You've got archaeological sites, you've got multiple owned Maori land. So it is very, very difficult. And that is reflected in, I guess, the costing that was identified for that preferred option, which came in, I think it's in here, I'm trying to find it, but I think it was close to, we had $271 million based on a 95% risk adjusted maximum cost, and that's back at 2020 values, and costs have risen significantly since then. So it's not a cheap exercise to, I guess, retrofit new corridors into these areas, and I guess that's why, in terms of our future planning, we're so focused on ensuring that we, structure plan and identify those corridors that we need in areas like Tutumu, because if you don't get them on day one, you're never probably going to be able to get them. And so that study, I guess, concluded with reporting through the council of the day decisions that it was not affordable to proceed with a project of that nature, and therefore only limited additional growth should occur in the Welcome Bay and Ohawiri area, and that was limited to anything that was already zoned, which I guess encapsulates that land at the end of Rosedale Drive. And the decision was to proceed also with that smaller area called Upper Ohawiri, because that was the only other area that was within the smart growth strategy at the time that hadn't been rezoned. And obviously, as we've talked about today, that proceeded through a private plan change. And then, I guess, as part of that private plan change, we worked with the developers on how they might lay out and develop their transport network, and ensuring that that happened in a way that it was possible to create future connections down into other roads like Pukimapu Road to create additional transport routes. But that was just around a future-proofing type exercise, not the fact that those roads and that investment was actually planned. And as we know, it will take some time for that Upper Ohawiri area to be developed. Currently, the land is being marketed for sale by the present landowners, so there's not even a developer in place at the moment there. Then there was also the other key investigation, which was for access to the land at the end of Rosedale Drive, because while that was zoned as part of Ohawiri in the early 1990s and structure planned, the way that development rolled out in that area, the adjoining subdivision effectively prevented access and servicing through the use of covenants and the way that they laid out their subdivision, and just through the fact that the various different landowners were not on, I guess, the same page. And so when the last council, the commissioners were in place, we were focused on quick wins around opening up new housing. it was identified that if we could overcome the covenants, that this would be an opportunity. And the council pursued that and made decisions where we acquired property and resolved those covenant issues with the affected landowners to enable this land to be developed. And as part of that, we went through quite a rigorous exercise through Sarah's team of investigating many different access options into that area, access off Pukimapu Road, access through the adjoining Maori land, and access through various roading that's through Hollister Lane, Rosedale Drive, and those sort of existing urban roads within Ohauiti. And it was decided that the access off Rosedale Drive made very much the most sense, particularly because access off Pukimapu Road would be cost prohibitive for a subdivision of that size. But nonetheless, as part of, I guess, moving through into the implementation stages of that land, that development of that land, which is led by the developer, of course, we're working with them to ensure that the way they lay out their subdivision, their roads, would enable us in future to carry on Rosedale Drive to connect to Pukimapu Road. Pukimapu Road then connects into Oropi Road. So again, it's not a project that's funded through our current LTP, but it's about future proofing for that option to happen in the future. Connecting to Pukimapu Road and Oropi Road would be no mean feat. There is a very big and steep escarpment to deal with. There are a range of property owners. There is flooding at the bottom. Pukimapu Road is a narrow rural road. It has a single lane bridge across the stream there. And then it joins onto Oropi Road in quite a difficult location near where the little service station is and where it winds up the hill. So it would be, again, an expensive undertaking, but nonetheless maybe the best option in the medium to long term for future connectivity. It would also link quite well with investigations that we've done for a future Western Corridor ring road, which would connect all the way from State Highway 29 through the Tariko Business Estate, through to Pies Pa Road and across Joyce and then to Oropi Roads. And there's a few different route alignments and options there. Some of them largely using existing paper roads, so existing roads that are just unformed, or others that are more cross-country routes. So I guess that's a wee bit of a summary of those. I guess the other just key point that I want to make is that there are other non-transport, I guess, opportunities to improve transport outcomes for those suburbs, in particular Ohauiti, by providing more facilities and amenities in those areas. So the biggest opportunities are around schooling. So there's no primary or secondary schooling in Ohauiti. And the other option, I guess, is around providing more sort of shopping and commercial facilities there. There's no supermarket. There's only 2 or 3 shops for what is quite a large and growing suburb. So that, obviously, with the schooling, we're not in control of that, but we've over time been engaging heavily with the Ministry of Education. But in terms of, I guess, zoning for commercial centres, that's something we'll be picking up through Plan Change 38. Anything else you'd like to add, Sarah, before we move to questions?
Thank you very much for that, Andy. Do I have any questions? Councillor Baker.
Mauri ora kia tātou. I firstly just wanted to say thank you to you, Andy, CJ, Sarah, and anyone else that's been involved in putting this together. It's really, I mean, for me, even though we can't get a road in tomorrow, just to see the genuine intent to be thorough and honest and transparent with what we can and can't do, considering, you know, the cards that we currently have at play, is awesome. And yeah, sorry for the little stitch up I put council through the other week, but I'm glad that we've got a publicly friendly memo that we can, that's obviously online and operative now, but also we can share publicly in and around the investigations that we've already done. Yeah, massive appreciation and thank you from me. On the, just picking up on the point at the around the conclusions page, let's skip to the bottom. 11. Is it too late to put having this being identified that the Pukemapu connection is, and like what you said as well, kind of the most viable option that makes sense, but no budget associated to it. Is it too late to put this body of work through the this year's LTP process? Annual plan. Is that something we can pick up, or is it too late?
So if elected members had in mind to do that, you could consider that. So you'll do deliberations on, I can't remember the date, the 24th of May. And if elected members want to put something into that process to consider whether you want to put additional funding in, yep, you haven't made final decisions yet. This committee could pass a resolution to consider investment through the annual plan, and then it would come up through a staff report, and we just cross-reference back to the resolution of today for you to make a decision. This committee can't make a decision to approve a budget, but it could request, or it could approve council considering that through the deliberations process.
Well, I'm keen for that, guys. And I think it's worth doing, and some, we picked up on conversations this morning downstairs and stuff, and looking at kind of the indicators that drive a lot of this work around the well-beings. It's stuff that I said throughout the campaign, and then around conversations that we've had to do with this body of work. We shouldn't be compromising the existing well-being of our people for the sake of growth, and I think this would be a meaningful body of work for us to debate and deliberate over the annual planned process, just to really show that out to our community that their well-being matters to us. And if it ultimately comes out that through that process it's not a viable option in the annual plan, then that's kids by.
Can we limit ourselves to questions for staff?
Yeah, sorry.
We'll leave this statement for when the motion's on.
Yeah. The other question was, plan change 38, that option, picking that up is great. I believe that's probably, do we have influence over manipulating traffic flow through 29A around Poiki Roundabout?
This is probably the one bit that I missed in my introduction to the report. So the work that we've done to date identifies that the key reason why there's congestion in the local network is because of the constraints that are on State Highway 29A, particularly at that Poiki Road intersection. There has been some investigations undertaken by NZTA in the past. So it's their asset and their investment to look to remedy that, but it really requires quite significant investment, and we don't have a lot of control over that. At the moment, NZTA, while it's been, I guess, identified through strategic planning processes like UFTI and the TSP, is something that needs to be looked at and progressed. It's not something that they are working on or looking to invest in at this point in time.
Councillor Kudak.
Around the Poiki State Highway roundabout, is that mainly the morning peak we're talking about, the aerial issues, rather than afternoon?
In the afternoon, the issues tend to be back on at the Oropi Road roundabout, and they push back down Oropi Road and down Fraser Street. So similar part of the network, but slightly different.
And the issue for the local community is that, I've driven through that route in the morning peak time, and there is a delay. I understand the delay for the commuters coming down Poiki Road and the suburbs around there is quite major, because I'm not sure how far back that tail goes, but it's quite significant. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Andy. Has there been any investigations around like lights, etc., on that Poiki Road roundabout, and or that traffic flowing like we do down at Elizabeth Street? Because again, the times that I've gone past, one of the big restrictions is those coming out Poiki Road can't actually get out. Has there been, because that's a much lower cost, and I know it's an NZTA asset, but do you know if there's been any investigations around that?
I can't recall the exact nature of the investigations that have happened. We'll just go away and get that information from NZTA and we can report back with that. But they're, from memory, they're largely more the sort of low cost investigations. I don't believe I recall anything to do with traffic lights. So.
More questions? As questions of staff are finished, thank you very much, staff, and thank you for the 2 reports. Very much appreciated and valued. Do I have a mover to accept, receives a report quarterly update? Councillor Morris is moving.
Move with an amendment.
See the amendment before I accept Councillor Taylor's seconding.
I'm sure Councillor Taylor will endorse it. B, that staff report back to the committee with 1, an assessment of alternative transport and infrastructure connections to Te Tumu, including the Kaituna link. 2, an assessment of alternative wastewater options. 3, consideration of costs, benefits, risks, and delivery timeframes for each option, with options for further direction from the committee. And I've got a rationale for introducing that today, which I'll speak to if it's accepted by a seconder.
Probably my first sort of fly in the ointment here, Councillor Morris, is do we have existing budget to undertake this? Can I have some sort of indication of whether we have existing budget to do this, or is this going to be a next year plan?
I'll speak to the transport one, and I think Andy or Nick might be able to speak to the wastewater. So in terms of alternative transport infrastructure connections, that has been previously explored, a bit like the Ohauiti matter that's just been reported today. So we can pull together the previous work and bring that back to the committee. And I think Nick or otherwise Andy can speak to available. We have talked to the developers and they were going to do some work themselves on alternative wastewater options. At this point, they've chosen not to, so I don't know.
Yeah, it looks like Andy's going to come up to talk to it, but just in terms of the assessment of options, that is part of the process that we would go through for Te Tumu service anyway. So unless we were to ring fence it and do a separate early sort of assessment, which then would be a cost associated with it. Otherwise, both for transport and for wastewater and stormwater, it is part of the planning process that we do go through. But obviously, that's not going to happen quickly, and also needs to be in conjunction with the developers.
Not to the business case level of detail or a structure planning level of detail, but a cursory look at what different options for provisional wastewater infrastructure might look like.
That is generally part of the multi-criteria analyses that we do go through as part of that process anyway. So, yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with.
I'll speak to it once I've got a seconder. I don't know if I've got a seconder, but there is a rationale, I can assure you.
Can just speak to it briefly. Claudia might want to join, but I'm not sure. She just walked in as the conversation was happening. But I think in terms of a high level almost list of what your wastewater servicing or other wastewater servicing options for the Eastern Corridor could be is something, you know, that can be provided pretty quickly. But in terms of the feasibility, the cost, the timing and all that stuff, that requires a significant amount of work. Some budget has been allocated next year for some further assessment of Eastern Corridor wastewater options, and it was sort of tied up with work that Western Bay were doing in terms of, you know, whatever might happen with the Eastern Centre proposal, but also the fast track proposals, particularly the Bell Road one, and then also the challenges we're facing with Te Tumu. So I was just briefly chatting to Claudia. We think around perhaps $300,000 has been allocated next financial year to start that work. So I think it might be a phased reporting back where we might be able to come back with some just very high level, sort of options that, and the ones that we think merit at least some more assessment, but yeah, okay.
I think that's very intuitive.
Thank you very much, Andy. So Councillor Taylor, are you still happy to second this?
It's not complete. Just there's a statement after 3 which says with options for further direction from the committee.
Yeah, happy to second it. I think I'd like to see where Mr. Morris is going with this one.
We have a supported second for discussion.
Thank you.
You wish to speak to
I
it
do,
now,
thank-
Councillor Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in terms of the charging the Crown for work that the local authority has done, I think it'd be great as part of our ERP system if we've got an easy way to generate an invoice. We can just flick it off to NZTA or flick it off to the relevant minister and set the debt collectors on them if they don't pay forthwith. But in terms of this particular resolution, Tumu is such an important part of the future of the growth of this city. And I am grateful for the memo that's been provided, and I'm grateful for the work that's been done over the years. That being said, we've got ourselves into a situation where we are relying on one landowner to get access both in a transport and in an infrastructure capacity through to that growth area. And insofar as the Kaituna link is concerned, without that particular piece of infrastructure, we may be creating the largest cul-de-sac in New Zealand, which is not good. In terms of the Turnit wastewater infrastructure options, we've been relying on Te Maunga and getting wastewater down there. So even if we did have access and infrastructure corridors to Tumu today, we're looking at the better part of a decade under the current plan to service that land. That also, I think, given the magnitude of the investment required, the importance in terms of growth of the city, I think it needs a good shakeout by this table. I think we've been well advised, and I think we've got reports and we've got memos, and it's been good, but I would like to see a step further in terms of the reporting back publicly to this table, the questioning by this table, and perhaps even some further direction going forward. Pleased to hear the work that's going on presently in terms of the assessment of those options. And my expectation would be, yes, it is at a high level, but I want to provide a formal avenue by which this table can issue direction publicly on Te Tumu. I think we can do better. I'm not saying that we will do better, but I think there's a potential to do that. So I think it's important that we get these reports back to this table. It saves notices of motion, ill-informed notices of motion flying around, if we can get the expert advice of our council officers. But I think it's something that needs a bit of energy from this table in terms of the urban growth area. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Councillor Morris. I agree with your sympathies on this. I think we've got to push this along. It's potential for the city. And I personally think it's probably one of the easier ones to get to. So supportive.
In relations to moving along development, I'm all in favour of it. This area's got many challenges for us. It's been a long running exercise trying to get houses built down there. And also Tauranga widely is having issues with getting houses built around the city due to different funding stream changes. Anyone else wish to say anything? Mayor?
Yeah, I agree around that Te Timo is an important part of our city's growth. You know, we are having positive, active communication at the moment to try to resolve some of the issues that we've had with access, etc. So I'm positive in that. I support this on the basis that it is just a high level. I think always looking at all options is an important role of this council. But I wouldn't want to see our staff buried in work to do in-depth sort of consideration. So on the basis that this is a high level, these are the sort of options that we'd look at, etc. And then there's further direction from the committee. Then yes, I am supportive of this.
Councillor Crowther, did you wish to say something?
On the Te Tumu issue, I support getting the options. I think that's good. I do have the words of Julian Fitter and the Makatu Wetlands Group in my ear still, which has been the result of years of submissions that they've made about the important status of that wetlands in that area, and the idea of Minister Jones, Councillor Morris, kind of leading the charge to go through the wetlands does fill me with a bit of horror. But I think it's good to have options, as the Mayor said. And I think that it's obviously a crucial growth area that is more just, I think there are people in the community who probably still thought, like I initially did, perhaps that it was not the most resilient place, but I think the resilience of that area is significant, and the growth pattern will be much benefited by having that. On the broader report, I guess I asked questions around the variable road pricing. I do think we've got to be a bit careful where we're going to position ourselves around that before we have any formal discussion as a council around it. It is such a trigger issue. I guess my colleagues who support it, have the luxury of not having an election for another few years, but it was an overwhelming response from the people of Tauranga, and not just through the official consultation, but through a large community survey and other things. So I think it's one thing to actually send in a submission on the proposal from the government. It's another thing to have discussions. But depending on what we're doing in terms of positioning it on the IPP, I do have some concerns there. And I'd be much happier, if we're worried about regional deal, I would be much happier to have the discussions focused on what Andy described as, a key point, which is the provision by the government of primary and secondary schools in the southern part of the city. And I think we absolutely need to have that at the forefront. And personally, at this point, I would rather, forget about the priority of the regional deal unless we can actually get something tangible from the government around education, because that is absolutely fundamental to that part of the city. State Highway 29A, we have major problems there already. When Turret Road is being worked on, we know what's going to happen. So forget the long-term growth, just the crisis facing us, that's going to highlight that area. And I think we need to, if you like, use that piece of progress that we're doing for the city to actually highlight to the government the need for them to step in. And I will pick up on one comment that that Hautapu, the Councillor Baker, has made in recent days around growth and the benefits of growth. And you highlighted again this morning. And I think we need to actually look at, who's benefiting and who's being hurt by growth. And I've picked up years ago on the phrase slow growth, sort of from, I just thought of it from the slow food movement. I think we need a slow growth movement in Tauranga. And I think that was something that Councillor Baker highlighted as well. And I really think we run the risk of actually not getting it right and causing long-term detriment to people. And that's the Welcome Bay situation. It may not be the fault of Tauranga City Council, but between the government in Tauranga City, we have to work together and actually put the infrastructure in first.
Councillor Schuler, do you wish to speak something? I can't see him to, Councillor Schuler, you're muted. Turn your microphone on, please.
Oh, can you hear me now? Chair.
I can hear you now. Did you have a question?
Just briefly adding to the conversation, I understand Councillor Morris's reason and rationale for introducing this. I just heard earlier, I think it was from Christine, about there already has been some work done. My connection's a bit average, but has there already been some work done on alternate links at a high level that we could get first before we, and then obviously read and understand those before we do anything official, or did I not hear that correctly?
Yes, so in terms of B1, that work has been completed, so we would just be reporting completed work to you, and then you could make a decision as to whether you wanted anything else. As Nick's noted, in terms of B2, there is some budget available next financial year to do some of that, so that would come at a slightly later date, so it would split into two pieces of work.
I'll get on that basis. I'm happy to support. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm supportive of this, and I think it supports a question I'm going to email staff just in terms of some of the Keenan Road updates we got in the quarterly report. And I guess a few of my colleagues have talked about some of the criteria under which we should be making decisions about where growth should be happening. And I don't think I'm clear, and perhaps I've missed it, on what criteria we do actually set. What are we, when we look at Te Tumu versus Ohauiti versus Keenan Road, what criteria are we assessing to say, yes, those have more priority than others? Do they include who are the beneficiaries of growth in that area? To Councillor Baker's comment. So I'm very supportive of this. I think I'm still feeling that we haven't had the opportunity to look at all of the growth options in Tauranga at a high level, not needing to go down, but just to say, let's make sure we are prioritising one versus another, because we certainly can't do them all, versus intensification right in the city as well. It's not, that's definitely got to be a big one for me. And I'd quite like a workshop where we are looking at all of those, but also if there are criteria for how we prioritise one growth area over another, I would be keen to have that clarified.
Arthur Flintoff.
I'm aware that Te Tumu's got a lot of cultural significance. It's not just in the land and the history there, but also the Kaituna River. And I'm also aware that Mana Whenua, all the trust there, is still negotiating for the easement through there. So I think it landlocks the peninsula. And as I understand, there's also concern about what that development and that end would impact on the Kaituna and stuff like that. Wondering, does this proposal that you're putting forward just get around that kind of negotiation?
Meeting's now reconvened.
Um,
Carry on.
I was speaking to Christine a couple of days ago regarding, I'm also owner on Te Tumu as well. But I'm not involved in negotiation. I'm not on the trust or anything like that, the owner. And that there's a potential conflict of interest. Also, the idea of negotiating with easement through there was actually my proposal. But that's all it was at one of the meetings that they held.
Thank you very much for that, Arthur. I'd like that conflict recorded. And now it's your choice whether you continue or not.
Yeah, I guess in my role here, naturally I would support Mana Whenua and what the efforts whatever efforts they're doing. I'm fine with it, so long as it doesn't conflict what they're trying to look after, really.
Thank you.
Carry on now.
If you want to just carry on, I'll be happy to stop. I'll move on to Councillor Baker. Did you put your hand up?
Kia ora. Yeah, total ko the kōrero that's been shared so far on A and B. And I also have a proposed amendment that I would like to table if it's appropriate. I just say it as a C? Yeah.
Have you emailed it through?
I emailed a version and then it got zhuzhed up by professionals. So a proposed amendment here is that C, that the committee requests that council consider investment through the 2025-2026 annual plan process to enable Ōhauiti and Welcome Bay transport planning and assessment to be undertaken. And if I have a second, I'd be prepared to speak to that a bit further.
I'll second the discussion.
Councillor Morris has seconded this. C, is that correct, Councillor Morris?
Yes, for discussion, yeah.
Councillor Baker, do you wish to speak to this?
Yes, yeah, just quickly. I think my fellow colleagues around the table have heard me. My sentiments around this particular kaupapa and my philosophy, I suppose, towards growth. So I won't labour on it too much. But I'm reading here in the executive summary for this report. And in 2, it says there, managing growth is a significant issue for council, particularly the challenge of ensuring growth is sustainable in a full wellbeing context for both current and future communities. I think for us to really live up and to embody that sentiment, undertaking this project or including it into the annual plan deliberations gives life to that statement. We need to weigh up the current lived experiences of current generations because those will only be passed on as we grow to the next generation. And I do think that an action of this nature is one small step for growth, but one giant step for the well-being of our people that live within those wards, that live within the wider Welcome Bay ward. Obviously, there are other things that we need to address. It's not just the Pukemapu roundabout or the Ōhauiti Rosedale area, but this is a chunky piece of palatable work that we can undertake as a council to really show that we are listening to our people and trying to be as malleable, but also as realistic as possible. So on top of what I've said over the past couple of weeks and months on this matter, That is my reasoning for tabling this zhuzhed up amendment today, because I think it really adds further, adds more feet on the ground when it comes, and to also to embody the conversations that we've had to date as well. And I appreciate the full 100% support of Councillor Morris.
Councillor Morris, do you wish to speak to this?
Yeah, no, I do support it. Be happy to subsume it into the substantive motion, but depending on the view of the committee, that's how much I support it.
Councillor Kurek, speaking to C.
Yes, I also support the amendment. It is just requesting through the annual plan process to put in place either a resource or funding to investigate, which I think we need to do. The community would be grateful for the consideration. The outcome might be to defer it, but it could be to move forward and properly assess the need.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this? Councillor Crowther?
Yeah, I'm happy to support the sort of options. I guess I do have concern around the resource that could be put into it if there wasn't strong support to make it happen quickly. I guess for me, the answer looks like it'd be far more cost effective to have the schooling option that I talked about, to do some work there as well, and to get sort of insights. I guess ultimately it'll be through any regional deal or other collaboration with the government, and to get indications of what is likely to happen or not happen there, because this could be heading down a very complex pathway to try to, an expensive pathway if we don't get that support.
I'm going to go to the Mayor first, then Councillor Kurek.
Yeah, look, I understand the sentiment. I think we're sort of putting the chicken before the egg here. I think we've, there is, and it is a big problem where we've got an annual plan. We're trying to take stuff out, not put stuff in. And while I agree, it is an important thing, I think we need to look at some of the less costly options first. For example, looking at traffic lights or traffic flow at lights like they have at Elizabeth Street through that Puake Road roundabout, potentially Ohauiti roundabout as well. And I think this is probably just a better to be dealt with through a long-term plan process, as there's a pathway there, to, if this is one of our priorities. But at the moment, I think we're putting it into an annual plan process. I'm just not sure we're going to get very far with that, because there is a lot of priorities for the city, and this is a big one. But it's, as we've just heard from Councillor Crowther, it's a very costly and expensive exercise, and we need to look at some of the interim things we may be able to do right now, and this is a longer, bigger piece of work, I believe. So,
Mayor, Councillor Kurek.
Just to clarify the amount of work required to put an item into the annual operations process, is that a big job?
So not a huge job. So what we would be doing would be preparing an issues and options paper where the staff would just note, this is the type of work that could be done, and here's what the costs are and how much budget would need to be put in. So, and then it would come to you through the deliberations as a decision for you either to approve funding to go into the annual plan to enable the work to proceed, or you make a decision. So we're not actually doing any technical work. All we're doing is an issues and options paper, requesting funding and just shaping it up a little bit more. So that's handable. It's the next step, which is actually doing the work, which is the next.
Okay, that's the end of everyone's questions. Are we happy to take this as a whole, or do you want it taken in parts? Only got
Put the amendment first.
put the amendment. Voting on accepting the amendment C. That the committee request that the council consider investment through the 25-26 annual plan process to enable Oauhiti Welcome Bay transport planning and assessment to be undertaken. All those in favour? Aye. That is carried. Against? Now, that's included. Now we're going to put the full motion that the City Futures Committee receives a quarterly update growth, land use planning and transport strategy projects, May to 25, and staff report back to committee with, I'm sure we can read from there, with options for further direction from the committee. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 9.2. For those who are viewing, it's page 41. Government reforms affecting Tauranga City Council. Andy and Christine.
So the purpose of this report is just to bring together a whole series of local government or reforms impacting on local government that are underway at the moment. Some of them you've had separate reports on, some of them there's workshops this afternoon on 2 matters, and others there are still future reports. So basically what it's laying out is that the landscape for local government is changing quickly and significantly. That would probably be my assessment of it. And so what and how things look like in the future are likely to be quite different from they are now when you take them together and look at them as an overall package. So I'm happy just to quickly speak to each of them in a summary form if you would like, and then if there's any questions, or happy to take it as read and take questions, up to you what your preference is.
I'm happy to take it as read and just ask questions of Christine. Excellent. We'll take it as read. Do we have any questions for Christine? If there's no questions for Christine, I'll call questions to staff as completed. Would someone like to move that the committee receives the report? Councillor Taylor will move that to receive. I'm happy to second that the committee receives this report. Does Councillor Taylor, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I think the report obviously gives us a heads up on the things that are coming at us. We don't have a lot of control over this, but it certainly affects just about everything we're doing. So yeah, it's really important that we get our heads around what is going on and maybe where some of this thing will actually end up. So looking forward to the workshop.
Sorry for that. This report brings into quite clear contrast the amount of legislation that's being passed in Wellington and the impact it's going to have on the decisions that come before us at this table. Obviously, the Funding and Financing one, the Resource Management Act, the Building Consent Reform Act, and the Local Government Reform. These are all things that are going to impact us directly, and it impacts on our decision making, and also impacts our staff's ability to put well-informed reports in front of us. If the landscape keeps moving, it's very hard to get the wording right. Does anyone else wish to speak to this? Councillor Kudak.
No, but what is interesting is the sort of global move towards the centre left. So I'm suggesting they get cracking if they want to make a lot of substantial change.
Thank you very much for that. Anyone else wish to speak? Are there? Oh, Councillor Crowther, almost got one.
No, I'd just say that this is something I think we really need to be on top of. And I know we've got a session a bit later today and public excluded, I think, in part of it. But I think when I look at what the implications are for people in the city, it's huge. And I really think we need to start communicating this as clearly as we can to the people.
Thank you very much. If no one else wishes, I'll put this motion to the floor that the City Future Committee receives the report, Government Reforms Affecting Tauranga City Council. All those in favour? Aye. All those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Now move to item 9.3, Carmichael Road Improvement Project, Planning Stage Update. Nick, page 59 in your agenda. Nick, Claudia, and Holly, welcome this morning.
Yeah, just by way of introduction, we have a legacy issue with regards to level of service for 17 properties off Carmichael Road in Bethlehem, for which we had a lowish type investment plan lined up, which has been or is being superseded by a plan change, which means that we need to now service a higher intensification of properties there. So that's a change of our plan. And this paper outlines the background to that, the change and the costs and technical components involved and timing as well with that. So we've got Claudia and Wally here to speak to the paper.
Morena Tato. Thanks for the opportunity to talk the paper. There's two options that are outlined in the paper. One is a gravity solution, and that provides for long-term development of the sites and the neighbouring property as well. And there's also a small bore option just for servicing those 17 properties. They both take around 4 to 5 years to implement. And at the moment, we do have a project in play for that, but we're just in the planning phase. There are significant interdependencies between servicing these properties and other projects in the area. So I just want to highlight that, especially the stormwater main across State Highway 22 to the south. And as Nick has mentioned, Plan Change 33 has really changed the way that we were looking at these parcels of land, because there is greater future development potential for that land. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for staff?
Thanks for the report. Gives us a couple of good options there. My question probably relates to the timing on this. Like, I don't know whether everyone's aware, but these people have been waiting on a promise from the mayor of this city some 12, 15 years ago. I'd hate to see that we've got another 6 years ahead of us. Is there any way we can pull this forward any further, or is every option going to be 4 or 5 years down the track?
So we are continuing with the planning, but in order to have a feasible design really thought through and then implemented, it just takes about 3 years at least. And at the moment, we have got sufficient funding for the next level of planning, but then we need to wait for the next financial year to actually get the approval through the long-term plan for the full implementation.
Yeah.
Is there a, just I guess, touching on that point, is there at the moment, I believe we're pumping out the septic tanks. Is that correct?
Yes, so we offered up that residents who need a pump out in the meantime, that we would pay for the cost. And to date, we had only 3 properties taking up that offer.
Okay, just an understanding, why are we paying for that cost?
Because of the delay. A promise was made by a previous mayor a long time ago, and we're just doing that as goodwill.
And I'm just trying to understand, because they don't pay any rates for wastewater at the moment. So they're kind of, you know, like it's sort of one of these things, and I understand it's in a bad position, but you know, the developers, well, whatever happened at the time, they put in septic tanks, and you know, ultimately they're not paying for a service from Tauranga City Council, yet we're going in and then paying for a service that they're not paying for. I'm a bit perplexed if they're gonna, you know, we can pay to pump out their septic tanks, but they should be paying a wastewater rate like everyone else does in the city to have their wastewater taken care of. Otherwise, I feel like it's a private, you know, it's a property owner's, you know, that's a property owner's benefit, I guess. But secondly, is there a, like on Councillor Taylor's, is there a solution where we have one pit or something down the end, and we connect a pipe that you know, does all this, it goes to a central location, we pump out one tank? It just seems like a more reasonable option in the meantime that would go into a wider solution.
To actually have such a facility in place would also cost additional budget to actually pipe everything to one location and to put another tank in, which would be able to hold more. It's probably more costly. I haven't done the kikes, but I would expect that it's more costly than having these individual pumps and outs. And it's normally not that they have to be pumped out every year, but depending on the use, it is sometimes only every 10 years. So while we have pumped out some of these ones, we potentially don't have to go back into them again, except if they are leaky or groundwater is coming into them. And probably one other reason why council agreed to offer this service is that it raises also public health issue potentially if these tanks would overflow.
Councillor Schuler. You're on mute.
Sorry, everyone, my connections are a little bit average this morning in my son's room. You may have seen him walk across the background a bit earlier. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I suppose, the questions around the planning is, for me, this is having been involved in this a little bit, and thanks for the report. I've been across it a bit with Wally in particular, and working with some of the residents to keep them calm, I suppose is the right word. So a little bit disconcerting to hear the mayor's words a minute ago, but not wanting to create any tension there. I suppose the question around planning and 3 years, there's been a lot of work. You know, there was a letter written to these residents, I think it was back in 2014, saying, yes, it's going to be done this year. Is there, and we've just heard in previous paper about people wanting to look at bringing stuff forward and looking after what we've got and assisting our people. I suppose the question is that planning process of 3 years, and is that, there's no way that can be worked on quicker, is it? It's just a process you have to follow?
Thanks for the question. The interdependencies with other projects is one of the major issues. Getting that stormwater pipe across State Highway 22 is a major impediment to installing a wastewater system there. The lowest part of the site where things would gravity flow to is prone to flooding. And until we remove that flooding, hazard, we're unable to put in a gravity system or even some of the pump system. Yeah, that part of the site is very prone to flooding.
Yeah, actually, supplementary, sorry, I did read that too. Sorry, Wally, and you have mentioned that to me before, the other part of that broader consideration. Okay, I understand that. So it is a part of that big picture that hooks in with across the road and obviously iwi land. There's there's 292 properties I think you're talking about as what would be capacity with this, but the area potentially has a lot more housing available. So the second question, I suppose, around that, looking at redoing the pipes right the way back to Bethlehem and the quite an extensive lot of piping that needs to be done. Does everything have to be done as one stage, or could there be the potential to satisfy the smaller 292 or 272 properties and then look at the broader expansion, or is it all a all or nothing type concept? End of question.
No, so it's definitely a staged approach. So we could start with the 17 properties plus development at 282 State Highway 2, where we have got an active developer. And then at a later stage, the Ngāti Kahu land could be connected, but also Proforiti, what's being decided there, if there's any desire for urban development that could be connected to this pipeline later as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I understand there's a wastewater pipe going, does it go pretty much down State Highway 2 from Omokoroa, which I would assume is a gravity fed. Is there any option to hook into that?
Yes, so we specifically looked into that option for the 17 properties for a low pressure system, and we had initial discussions with Western Bay District Council because it's their pipe, it's not ours. And so the 17 properties officers were quite certain that could happen. If we want to bring more flows into this pipe, that would potentially hinder their development in Omokoroa, where they're relying on this pipe on. So there are these political discussions which potentially need to be held.
Is 17 really going to be the thing that breaks the camel's back?
Oh, no, the 17 wouldn't have been the problem. But we are talking about that this land where the current 17s are can be developed to high density. So 6 stories high under the city plan. So then we are talking about quite a substantive different amount of dwellings.
So if we're talking about the 17 to solve a problem, because we're talking 5 years, assuming we got agreement from Western Bay, how long could it take us to put in a pipe and hook it into a Omokoroa wastewater pipe?
Yeah, so that was basically our other option, the low pressure system option, because the land is so flat, we still need to get the water into the pipe, and that would also cost, it's a lower cost, but would be still over 2.7 million. And we don't have the policies in place for operating such a system. So who is paying for what is being paid by the private owners, what is being paid by council?
Or that low pressure system that is going into the Omokoroa. Okay.
Councillor Crowther.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, can you clarify, like, I guess I remember last year putting questions to the team around, are there projects, and I was thinking this is one of them, that would ideally be in the Waters program, either in the annual plan or in the years leading up to the long-term plan in 2027 or in the following years. And I teased out those parts, and I think, Nick, you were saying you were comfortable that everything was in there. I guess I'm just struggling to figure out why we're now at this point where we have quite a significant investment if we want to do it in a future-proof way, because obviously if you're looking at the 2 options, one of them is future-proof. And I'm trying to understand, are there other things like this around the city? And why can't we sort of get a bit of an understanding earlier, especially if we're asking explicitly for that? I'm really struggling with that.
Cool. So this is a little different to our other unserviced properties that we have around the city, of which there are about 2,000. This one is different in that it is zoned residential, full residential, and it's unserviced. So that is the major difference. The other thing that's happened in the interim between the past planning and putting it into the LTP to get this work done is Plan Change 33 has come in, And now the development of that site, potential development for those sites, is so much bigger than it was in the past. So the project is bigger than it was in the past. So we will need to come back to the LTP for future funding, depending on which decision the council wants to go with.
Would you like a supplementary, councillor Powell?
Thank you. Yeah, supplementary, I guess, did you know that last October, November, or was this recent information did you not think this would be needed, the extra capital expenditure? Because I thought Plan Change 33 that's my point to my initial question.
Sure. This has been in the LTP for many years. It just has been pushed out through subsequent councils as pressure on the balance sheet or pressure for constraining budgets. It's continually moved for quite some time. So it wasn't just since October. Yeah.
Maybe I can just comment on the lead up to that as well. So when we started that annual planning process, we had a budget for waters at about $190 million. And that encompassed a lot of capital project works as well. We have now ended up at a draft annual plan budget for waters at about $90 million. So obviously a lot has come out. And I guess the comments at the time, we go through a prioritization process. We're comfortable that we can progress with what has to be done in order to meet a certain level of service. And although these 17 are compromised, I guess it sort of needs to be understood by council that the difference between 190 and 90 following the IFF decisions and NZTA funding decisions, etc., which weren't known at the time we put that plan together, needs to be taken into consideration.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Taylor.
Don't really want to labour the point, but I probably just need a bit more clarification around the current septic tank situation for these 17 properties. Are you able to expand on the reasoning that they need to move them on?
I'm not sure I understand the question, sorry.
I believe that the septic tanks have got a limited time period where they can keep being used. Is that correct?
Yeah, the disposal fields from those septic tanks, in some cases, the disposal fields have blocked. They're not working properly. And that's one of the reasons that we're pumping them out.
That's regional council overseeing that? No?
No, we're just doing that off our own initiative.
So they're not fixable at all?
Unlikely.
Any more questions of staff? Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Trying to formulate a level of service policy in my head. Going back to, I think, 1994, I can remember the digger in the back of our backyard growing up in Papamoa when Papamoa was connected to reticulated sewage. When this paper comes back in the future, I'd be interested to know what the deal was for Papamoa residents who connected to sewage. I think there was a significant council subsidy to do that, and it was also compulsory. I think everybody had to do it. But in terms of a policy for connecting residents to reticulated sewage, that would be something I think would be useful for me in making a decision of where the cost lies, given thousands of people in Papamoa benefited, and then of course the city benefited by the growth, if you sort of buy that. Hey, Councillor Crowther.
Did you have a clear question in there somewhere, Councillor Morris?
Yeah. What was the, do you recall, Wally? Will you excuse the intrusive question? Were you around back then?
I was around then. I don't recall the subsidy discussion. I do recall putting the pipes out there and decommissioning the 2 package plants. We do have a policy that requires people to connect to sewage, but the sewage has to be available. And in this case, the sewage is remote. It's not within a distance, an easily achievable distance. So they haven't been required to connect because the asset was not there for them to connect to at the time the properties were built. I think is a question.
There is a question from councillor Schuler.
Can you hear me again?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Hey, just final question, and thanks for the opportunity to ask again, Chair. Just in the workings, Wally and Co. on page 60, I think it is. So we're looking at 200. It's only a high level discussion, but we're looking at 292 properties able to be serviced at the moment, right? And the question I ask is, would the existing 17 homeowners under normal policy get those connections free, which effectively means it's 275 new connections, or is the 292 already factor in the 17? End of question.
It's included.
Okay.
So they wouldn't be paying for the installation of the network, but they would be paying a connection fee.
Yep, thank you.
So the cost of putting in either of these systems would fall on the city, but they would pay a standard connection fee to connect to that network.
Thank you.
Around $700. Yes, I'd have to have a look in the fees and charges.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? No, the questions of staff have finished. Thank you very much, staff, for the report and your answers. Much appreciated. Will I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Mayor Mahay to move. Deputy Mayor Schooler to second. Mayor, do you wish to speak to it?
Obviously, this is an issue we have to try to deal with. Look, I think we should look at options of trying to speed this up. You know, there has to be you know, we got to figure out how we deal with that and the costs involved. But yeah, at this stage, it is something that would be good to get done as soon as we can.
Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak? No. Anyone else wish to speak to this? Councillor Taylor?
Probably repeating a little bit of what I said before, but the mayor of the city made a promise to these people a long time ago and nothing has happened. So to me, it's urgent that we do something and be seen to be doing something.
Councillor Crowther?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really helpful getting this report, and I concur with Councillor Taylor that there has been a promise made, and that is important to me. I guess I have concern just in terms of how this came to us and the lack of, you know, the not being included in the discussions last year, when I recall several times asking explicitly about the things that weren't included in the long-term plan. And I think I'd really like to stress that it'd be helpful to get that clear before we make decisions in our deliberations later this month, because, you know, we're spending 22% of CapEx on waters. Now, I've gone back and had a look, and that is not, unless I'm getting the figures from the wrong parts of the reports, that is not normal, you know, in the growth environment. It's low, I think. And, you know, one has to ask, is it because of political pressure that was there before? And I think it was, with the commissioners quite clearly stating, you know, that waters was taken out so that other nice to haves could be included. Secondly, that we have a waters reform happening, and you have to also ask the question of, is it happening for that reason as well, that there are not ulterior motives necessarily, but certainly motives there to maybe just not up the waters spend. And this is an example of where it really cuts through to us. It impacts our budgets if we go ahead with this. This is, to me, essential infrastructure for people in our community. Most of us, many decades ago, in Tauranga got onto off-septic tanks, and because it's impacting them, and I know Councillor Schuler has described the impacts as well as people I know in that area, that this is important, but I just think we've got to see it as part of a bigger picture too, that I'm really concerned we need to understand what is needed for waters. And I guess I'm overly stressing this probably, but I would love to think we could get a comprehensive report sometime soon around what isn't in that plan. I've asked for it before, but I would really love to see that, of what should be in there if Waters team was running our LTP. Thank you.
Yeah, this is just another example of what happens when some things get prioritised over others, and some of our community gets a little bit left behind. I do agree that this needs to have a bit more of an oomph to it, a bit more priority put towards it, about finding a solution to 17 Tauranga residents who have waited an awfully long time to find a solution to what the rest of us take for granted. It's an example of how important our waters infrastructure program is, and the impact that it has on those, and those that live with a less functioning urban water system what they have to put up with. All that being said, anyone else have anything to say? I'll put the motion to the floor that the City Futures Committee receives the report Carmichael Road Improvement Project Planning Stage Update. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. I'd like to take this time for a short 10-minute break to adjourn the meeting at 11:19, and we will return here at 11:30. Welcome back, everyone, to the City Future Committee, Monday, May the 5th. We'll reconvene the meeting. The Mayor has excused himself from the meeting. He's got some other business to attend to. So for the remainder, he'll be back when he can get back, I'm assuming. Next item on the agenda, item 9.4, approval of lead level of service policy. Christine and Vicky will speak to this. This is an overarching policy under which all our other level of service policies sit. Christine, to introduce.
So this is an existing level of service policy, and as the chair said, it's an overarching policy, and then there are a range of individual policies that would sit underneath it, or directives. There's some around passive and active sports, things like asphalt versus chip seal roading, those types of matters addressed through individual level of service policies. As part of our regular updates to policies, it's been reviewed and we're proposing some tweaks and some tidy ups to be addressed. So I'll pass over to the team and they'll talk about some of the detail.
The Chair, Tēnā koutou. So the lead level of service policy was last reviewed in 2009. So we checked in with the business units who often use this policy. So our corporate service team, our growth funding team, our open space and community facilities planners. And they found that on the whole, the policy is working well in terms of the considerations that they need to provide to you as council in terms of some of those decisions around levels of service. However, they did identify that it was in need of a bit of a refresh to make sure that we're referencing up-to-date strategies and up-to-date parts of the city plan. And we also took the opportunity to clarify a little more around how levels of service fit within council's overarching performance framework and how they support the achievement of community objectives and outcomes. We also wanted to clarify the link between levels of service and our collection of development contributions to set out that this is a way that we can calculate development contributions by having a really measurable, clear level of service. And as Christine mentioned, this is an overarching policy that supports a number of supporting policies, and those relating to the open space area will be coming back to the committee later this year with those. So within the paper, two options are presented. There's the option to adopt the refresh immediately, or the option to adopt it for some targeted consultation prior to an adoption.
Thank you very much for that. All I'm going to say to this is we have two options before us, and I'd ask fellow members if we're going to accept it as it is, we'll accept it. If we want to make changes to it, we'll take B and we'll refer it back for consultation. All other discussion will take place at the consultation if we choose to. So questions for staff will be based around what changes have been made and how it will affect our level of service, or Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, Chair, just clarification. When we're talking consultation, are we talking about councillors doing a workshop, or are we talking about going to the public? What are we anticipating consultation would be on that?
Can you speak to that?
Through the Chair, yeah. So we would imagine it would be with some targeted stakeholders like Tarangapu, Smart Growth, Priority One, potentially Social Link. So kind of reaching out to our member bodies across the sector. We don't consider that public consultations likely to be hugely fruitful in this case because it is a technical policy, but certainly reaching out to groups that would have an interest as well as yourselves for direction.
Councillor Correct.
Thank you. So targeted stakeholder consultation. I'm trying to visualise what that would be. But so why wasn't there a recommendation? So you're open either way. And what do you anticipate coming back if we did go out to the targeted stakeholder group?
Through the Chair. So with this policy, we assessed it against the significance and engagement policy of council. And so as the report identifies, we've assessed it as low significance. So it is an option to do more consultation than what's required under the significance and engagement policy. But for our recommendation, we went with what was assessed under the significance and engagement policy. Targeted consultation is likely to be emails out to people, direct contact. It's not expected to be hugely expensive. So it's more a preference for you as a committee, what you would like to see happen.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. So just, I've got a few questions, but I'm not going to, I think they're but administratively, but so just to clarify for my understanding, so this policy enables the 131 KPIs we've got, or some of those, is that correct? So these are what this sets out, enables that measurement to happen.
So all of the decisions about the measurements themselves still sit with council to make that decision about setting the level of service. This policy helps us as staff to make sure that when we're reporting to you, asking for direction on a level of service, that we have some guidance in place. So a recent example is like the playgrounds work that went to the City Delivery Committee, where you were moving from an existing level of service to a desired level of service. And so the team kind of worked through those factors within the policy around looking at socioeconomic factors, looking at the renewal and asset information. And so they worked through that kind of criteria. So it supports staff to support you with good information when you're making those decisions as council.
Supplementary, so that when you talk about, and the policy talks about, sometimes there's a standard level of service and then there's a higher level of service. Would there be measurables, would both be measured so we know that one's being met versus the other?
So there's an example in terms of with kind of berm planting in certain areas in Tauranga, there was a higher level of service put in with developers, and the agreement was that there'd be a targeted rate collected to provide that extra maintenance and ongoing operational cost, and that's called out in the LTP. So that's an example of where a comprehensive development area has a higher level of service. And then there are other levels of service, say, for example, for special character areas in the CBD, we have a higher level of street cleaning than we do in other areas of Tauranga, and that one isn't specifically called out. And so the difference tends to be around whether there's a targeted rate associated with that higher level of service. But again, this policy is to help guide how we consider levels of service and help guide staff to make recommendations around why you might want a higher level of service in a certain area. So that kind of special character area might be a reason why you might want to consider a higher level of service.
Any more questions of staff? Thank you very much, staff. Very well put together report. We now have a recommendation before us. Do I have a mover? Councillor Crowther to move. Do I have a seconder? I'm happy to second. Councillor Crowther, do you wish to speak to it?
To reinforce it's an excellent report. Thank you for laying that out.
Do we have a preference to accept approves the level of service as per attachment 1? Councillor Taylor.
I'm probably of the opinion, I'd like to see another option taken up, and I don't know whether I'm out of order here, but I don't know that I especially have got enough of a handle on what this level of service thing means. This is an overarching lead agreement that probably feeds into the
level of service agreement
specifics, and I think potentially as a group we might need more understanding to set this. I know it's come to us as a recommendation, but I'd be more comfortable if we had some time to learn a bit more, I suppose.
A quick question, if we go to adopt draft for targeted consultation, we participate in that consultation process?
Two options. You could put it for draft and then participate, or you could adopt it and then you could still have the conversation. And if you felt that it needed some change as a result of you getting a great understanding, then you could do that at that point. So it's either or. The policy itself is more really around process than anything in lots of ways. So yeah, either would work.
So from my personal point of view, I'm happy to receive the report, approve lead level of service. If during the process that we find something that we're not happy with or we'd like to add to it, we can come back and do that at that point. Yeah.
I'm finding, I think if we look at the policy, there's an awful lot of red versus black. So there's a lot that's being brought in that I don't necessarily generally why would that have happened? Why has that been changed so significantly? And I'm not, I haven't got that understanding. I agree with Councillor Taylor that I think it's so important that we understand level of service. It's mentioned so often. The fact that this policy, as amended, is guiding staff and how they bring level of service discussion to us suggests to me that I should know exactly what this means will happen. I haven't quite got how does this impact the measurables, and am I comfortable that they are very measurable versus, yes, the theory's there, but what are we actually measuring, and what's the impact of a targeted rate and what we measure on a higher level of service, for example. The example we were given that when we approved the change of playgrounds, that this policy influenced how that was written. I certainly didn't read that, and when I read this policy, oh yeah, that's a link to that. So I'm definitely missing a little bit of context of how this is used. I'd like some sort of diagrams to say, okay, this is if you've got a level of service and there's a targeted rate, this is how a measure is agreed, and this is how it's measured and reported against. So I don't believe we're quite there with this policy, and I would like some more time to have a workshop on understand level of service really well, because I think it's what our people want us to deliver on, but we need to know exactly we need to know that we can meet their requirement for delivery on level of service.
So from that, are you making a recommendation or putting forward
I'm happy to receive the report, but I would like an amendment to say and workshops level of service with an intention to clearly understand the outputs for the people of Tauranga. But I don't think we're ready. I'm not ready to approve these changes yet. I don't think I know enough yet.
Councillor Kurik?
Perhaps Councillor Schooler, if we went for option 2, and that was to have targeted consultation, but then also have a workshop subsequent to the feedback that we got, or potentially opportunity to discuss what you're talking about here, plus any recommendations that might come through that targeted consultation. Because I'd support that.
Yes, I think we do need to know, because this is very much how our people, the outputs for our people, and I think it's yes, we should consult with them to see what they understand from level of service as well. So a combination of a workshop and some consultation is important. Eva, you writing this for us?
Can I have a general consensus around the table that this committee will support option 2 as it sits in your agenda? So on page 69. I will have to, I'll ask them in a minute.
Yeah.
So para 18 on page 69, we had a recommended option of adopt draft policy with immediate effect, or option 2, adopt the updated draft policy for targeted consultation.
I would like a workshop as well.
We can include that as well, but if we follow on what Councillor Kurek has stated quite clearly, if we go to consultation and included in the consultation feedback, we will have a workshop for elected members to discuss. Over general consensus, Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, I really think we should have the workshop first. We get a better understanding and then we can decide if it needed to go to consultation or not, would be my preference, but yeah, depending on what other people think. So I think I'm quite happy with either of the way.
Anyone else have a comment? Arthur?
I think this is an opportunity to expand this policy to include, there's a few things that I found that are missing out of it. One is a statement regarding the Treaty of Waitangi, and the other one is to include into the service definitions regarding mana whenua principle. So this probably expands from what you're saying, workshop to understand it, to actually include, well, from a tangata whenua perspective, to include that into this high level policy. And because this is the one that overarches all the other service levels. And we would like the Rangipu to be able to workshop that as well. And we'll bring it into line with section 14(1)(c) of the Local Government Act. All that.
Councillor Crowther, do you have any opinion on this?
I guess I sort of see this as a, as staff indicated, a kind of a, procedural orientated policy. And I'm struggling with targeted consultation or engagement in the sense that like there's huge demand from the people of Tauranga to have a say in a lot of things, but I'm not sure how much they want to say in this. So if we're talking about just in general, like that's not targeted. Are we talking consultation? Are we talking engagement? Are we talking about some quite technical issues, which is what it looks like to me, which I'd struggle to think there'd be big interest in this. But if there are fundamental issues that haven't been addressed in terms of the Local Government Act or anything like that, that's obviously highly important. But I suppose I sort of see the next layer of this as being important when you take the policy and then start to implement the policy, knowing that you can never precisely put in a policy what that will lead to in every situation. So in sports and recreation, how we interpret the policy and implement that policy in that context, that would be of great interest, I think, to the public. But whether they have much interest in this actual policy, I guess my starting point was thinking, let's just take the work the staff have done. It looks fine in general terms and not spend a lot of resource and time with it, but I'm open to further input.
Councillor Morris, looking to your experience here.
Well, that's either a positive or a negative. I think we're witnessing an interesting situation here. I'm not much of a contortionist, so I'll be straight out with it. I think Tangata Whenua Representative Flintoff has raised an issue with this around perhaps the introduction of principles of Treaty of Waitangi and other issues and targeted consultation with mana whenua. And I think if the committee table wants to explore that, then I think we should say that. I think that if we don't wish to explore that, then I think we should say that. I think in terms of how the policy is worded, I am comfortable with how it is worded and happy to vote in favour of the resolution. But I think that if the committee as a whole has a different view and would like to explore further the matters raised by our tangata whenua representative, I think we should clearly state that and clearly state that targeted consultation is with tangata whenua. I don't think we are, as someone who is ambiguous at the best of times, I don't think we're serving our community well by being ambiguous on these sorts of issues.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mosler. And from a personal point of view, I support it as it is presented to us, based solely on the fact that this is the overarching policy for level of service. So where council's duties and functions impact on footpaths or mounted trees that are growing, probably doesn't really impact the wider population as much. Where we're talking about sports grounds, amenities for clubs and clubs, then it does impact. So I think in the lower levels, there's a definite place for inclusion of mana whenua. But at this point, we were just discussing the overarching level of service, of which everything else will drop out of. I don't think this is quite the place for it. We've got it well and truly covered under the Local Government Act. So for me personally, I'm happy to support A and B. If we as a group need a workshop to understand the impact of the decision we're making today, I'm more than happy to support us having a workshop, but I don't think it needs to be stated in here. Broad agreement on that? Councillor Baker.
Kia ora. I share the similar whakaaro as Councillor Taylor and Jen actually on probably needed. I would also actually appreciate a workshop to better understand our levels of service, particularly as to, and then subsequently how it applies, which I'm sure would be able to navigate as we have this workshop. But I think that part is really important to this process, and I probably couldn't support B as it stands, and would much rather appreciate the workshop to better understand that, so I'm making good, well-informed decisions, and then from there we can determine what needs to be done.
Deputy Mayor.
I just would like to, there's a couple of, I think, definitions that if we are going to accept it, then I would ask that the council as a definition is changed. And I think that we are council, that TCC staff or TCC officers are not, so they're not called. So at the moment, the definition is the little c council is TCC organisation. And I just think it's confusing because that council could be the start of a sentence and therefore have a capital C, which is elected members. And I would like a definition to have council being us with a capital C and always refer to previous council when a decision was made by previous council. And I would actually like that across all of our reporting because it would make it a lot clearer. We do tend to use staff, TCC organisation, the council, commissioners. And so if we had council, previous council and TCC staff as definitions, that would make it a lot clearer for me.
Right, so from my personal perspective, as a second to this, I'm happy with A and B. I'm happy for the staff to have a workshop for us, but I don't think it needs to be in here. Councillor Crowther, are you happy to progress this motion as is with or without the workshop?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, and with the workshop if people want it, and I guess Councillor Morris raised, you know, an opening if people wanted an amendment or whatever.
Does anyone else wish to speak, or I'll put this motion? Just a quick one, Arthur.
Clarity, are you going to be going through each one of these, or is it the whole thing together?
We should take it in parts.
Yes.
Yeah, can do. So, recommendation of the City Future Committee A receives a report approval of the lead level of service policy. All those in favour? Aye. That motion is carried. That the City Future Committee approves the lead level service policy as per attachment 1 for adoption with immediate effect. All those in favour? Aye. Councillor Crowther, Councillor Morris. Against? Can we see how Kev's voted? Councillor Taylor.
I voted for B, thank you.
4. No, it's 5-4. Five, 4 against that motion is lost.
Sorry, Chair, did you get my vote?
Yes, your result is recorded as in favour, is that correct?
Yeah, thank you.
In terms of progressing it, I'd move option 2. The whole workshop, considering the feedback via the targeted consultation, stakeholder consultation, not wider public.
Are you moving an amendment? Are you going to add a
Motion.
motion? Add a motion?
Yep, option 2, what page was that? Adopt the updated draft policy for targeted consultation and a workshop first. Councillor School is suggesting doing a workshop first.
Can we get the wording right for Councillor Kodak's motion, and then I'll ask for a seconder?
So that TCC hold a workshop prior to adopting the updated draft policy for targeted consultation.
So just one small clarification before we go any further. We can hold the workshop on this, but we can still adopt option 2.
Process perspective, you'd have to approve the draft policy for consultation subject to the workshop if you wanted it. Otherwise, we don't have anything to take out, or we have to report back after the workshop, in which case you then approve it at that time and it goes out for consultation after that. So we actually need an approved document to consult on.
Understand where Councillor School is coming from, but I personally would support going out for the consultation and holding a subsequent workshop. Take into account back.
If that's what you wanted to achieve, I'd suggest your resolution would be along the lines of approve the draft policy for targeted consultation, and in parallel with the consultation, hold a council workshop, a committee workshop. That's what you want to do. That's how you could word that resolution.
Councillor Morris?
Just so we've been clear, can we have in the resolution who we're conducting targeted consultation with? Not sure who is it? Is it developers? Is it mana whenua? Is it the community in general? Is it our friends at Plenty Regional Council? Who are we holding targeted consultation with? I think it probably needs to be explicit in the resolution so that we can do that. Well, I think it needs to be specific because you're targeting. So if you either have consultation with everyone or you have targeted consultation with an unnamed, who are you having targeted consultation with?
Staff in the back of the room there can respond to this.
Councillor Kodak, this is our time. We need to decide this ourselves.
A new resolution, so we might require some questions.
Well, option 2 is a current one, and we're going to decide whether or not we want to have a workshop on it. That's all. Yeah, well, you want what I'm asking from the floor, do you want the workshop before the consultation, then the consultation, if it's needed?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm happy with that.
Happy with that? So, Arthur.
I was going to second it.
Yeah.
If we can also include the workshops for the Rangaputu workshop it.
Yeah, we would workshop it as this committee. We would workshop it first. Yeah. So can I have an indication of the wording that we want for this, please? Deputy Mayor?
Do we need I'm very supportive of holding a workshop for this committee, but I understood we don't need a motion for that. We can just organise that. So can I just confirm that we don't need a motion just to hold a workshop? Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a question there, Deputy Mayor? What's the clarity? Well, it sounds breaking in and out a little bit.
Sorry,
Approve the
Councillor
draft-
Shawless.
Yeah, I'm just
So-
approving the draft policy. Is that as per we just voted down,
Just
or I'm
lost
just a bit
it,
confused?
correct. I think we're actually agreeing that, so we're agreeing that with the resolution as the carried and lost, we can still hold a workshop for this committee. And after that workshop, we decide what the next actions are. And so it becomes an action that we hold the workshop, but we don't need that motion, in my view.
Workshop may or may not amend the draft.
Correct. Councillor Crowther.
I'm just aware of like the time passing by. Is it that we are letting this lie on the table, or like, I mean, in terms of the main motion, I'm just trying to figure out what the end goal, I'm just missing a piece here. And I don't know if it's to do with mana whenua consultation or if it's to do with something else, but it just seems a complex mystery to me.
Mr. Taylor?
From my point of view, it's definitely about learning more before making a decision, much as the Mayor, Deputy Mayor said earlier on. At this point in time, it has nothing to do whatsoever with mana whenua. If they're consulted with on this issue going forward, well, that'll be up to the workshop. But at this point in time, it's about me understanding completely what I'm approving.
The action is incorrect, that TCC hold a workshop on the policy, on the draft policy. Oh, no, full stop.
Yeah.
Okay, now do I have a seconder to Councillor Cruick's motion?
He took it out.
So it failed for a
Fails.
seconder.
So the motion.
Rightio, this is going to sit right where it is until we have a workshop and then we'll come back to this. Thank you very much. Last item on the agenda today, 9.5, page 81. Christine to introduce.
So we have, as you're aware, a whole series of policies, and what we regularly do is just go through them and update them. And as part of that updating process, we sometimes identify as ones that are no longer relevant just because time superseded and other things have happened, or they've been subsumed into other policies. So just really trying to keep our overall policy framework up to date. So there are a number here that we are suggesting are no longer required as individual standalone policies and recommending they be revoked. Take it as read and happy to answer questions on anything, and some of the staff in the room can help as well.
Do you have any questions for staff? Yeah, I know, I've got one. So my question is basically around the sewerage. So it's B3, private sewer pump stations. I understand there was some support or help given to residents when connecting. Would that have applied to the residents, 70 residents of Carmichael Road, had we have done the plumbing to their front gate? And if we remove this policy, we automatically removing them from something that other residents of Tauranga had available to them? Just clarification on that, please.
No, we're comfortable with the revoking. So there are many private pump stations in the city, but most of them, well, actually, I think all that I know of are under Part B anyway. So they were are the responsibility of the installer, the resident, and not aware of any under Part A where we would have a contribution component that still apply.
Arthur?
Regarding the reimbursement and contribution to cost connection to private stormwater systems, I'm sort of aware of a block that have been putting pipes through theirs because the stormwater overflow that's been going through their property. I guess the question is, how aware would they be of this policy even existing? Because I don't think they know of it.
Talking stormwater. Stormwater. Yeah, well, I guess if it has gone through a consenting process, they would have been made aware.
Deputy Mayor?
I guess so. Those two conversations lead to my question. So are you comfortable that there are currently no people that are going to be impacted by revoking these policies? So there's nothing, and to your knowledge, these don't negatively impact the people of Tauranga because they are in fact redundant policies.
Yeah, that's right. And if you use, yeah, okay, Carmichael as an example, they would be public pump stations. Yeah. Yeah, so not on the owners of the residents, and if we're talking those 17 properties, for instance, in particular, that would be serviced by public pump stations.
Through the chair, we also checked with the rates team to make sure that wasn't being applied in terms of that discount, and it's not currently included in the rates remission policy criteria. And just with the stormwater policy, the last time we know of it being used was around 1995 when we installed some drainage around Grace Road, Harvey Street. With rescinding this policy, we're not necessarily saying we shouldn't consider these costs. It's more that we don't necessarily need a policy on record for that decision, and we're suggesting that it can be covered in terms of that project planning if we are looking to put council stormwater in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? So Kurak is happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Taylor. Councillor Kurak, do you wish to comment?
Gauge of efficiency.
Councillor Taylor, do you wish to comment? Sorry, I'm just a bit taken aback by Councillor Kurak's answer there. Thank you very much. It is a very good answer. Yeah, this is just another opportunity that we can tidy up our policy schedule and hopefully make us a little bit more efficient. Did I put that the City Future Committee receives a report policies to revoke? B, agrees to revoke the following policies: utilising portable water for dust control policy 2016, 2, handling collection policy 2009, 3, sewage private sewer pump stations 1994, and 4, reimbursement and or contribution of cost to connection to private stormwater systems 1997. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. Discussion of late items. Are there any late items? No late items. Councillor Baker, would you like to give us a closing karakia, please?
Absolutely. Ka whakairia te tapu kia wā te tara ki mui a tātou kia tūri ki whakataha e, kia tūri ki whakataha e, haumi e, hui e, tā e ki e.
Thank you very much. I now declare the meeting closed at 12:12.